Germany around the 3rd or 4th centuries AD. And according to Britannica, the stakes were a bit higher than mere diversion back then. It was actually a religious ritual involving the clubs used widely at the time called Kegels, normally used for other leisure activities, as well as self-defense. The Kegels were set up at the end of a lane, similar to how pins are used in bowling alleys today. Within the ritual, the Kegels represented the Hyde or heathen. Parishioners who succeeded in knocking down all the heathen pins with a rolled stone were considered to be cleansed of sin. So while bowling is now a fun activity that brings us together, it was initially meant as an explicitly us and them way of dividing people further along religious lines. Luckily now, it's just a fun way to pass an evening with friends and some delicious snack bar nachos. Alright, so I'm still trying to look up to see if I can find any more information about the origins or the history of bowling. And I found bestofbowling.com, and it was published last year, by Joshua Francia, March 16th. And it basically says the same thing, more or less, about the history of bowling. About in 1930, the British anthropologist Sir Flinders Petrie and other archaeologists that were on his team discovered that, the various primitive bowling balls, the bowling pins, and other materials in the grave of an Egyptian boy. Then it goes on to say, very shortly before the reign of Narmer, one of the very first Egyptian pharaohs. That gives a little bit more information. Their discovery represents the earliest known historical trace of bowling. Then it goes on to also talk about the German historian we talked about, William Peel, asserted that bowling began in Germany. And he went on to say in this article or this blog that monks would set up the pins, and we talked about that, called Kegels, which represented human sins or human temptations, and they would throw the stones at the pins, thus thinking they can conquer sin, their sin. And kegeling is another term for bowling even today. Now, another piece of this that doesn't necessarily have to do with anything mystical is that it says that it is believed that King Henry the Eighth bowled using cannonballs. And it says that King Henry also famously banned bowling in 1366 for all but the upper classes because so many working men and soldiers were neglecting their trades. So it became so contagious they couldn't stop playing it, that they were neglecting their duties. Then it says after it had got banned, that Dutch colonists brought bowling to America in the 17th century, and it was regularly played in an area of New York still known as Bowling Green. Then it says bowling at that time was only 9 pins, unlike today's 10-pin formation, and that was until 1841 when Connecticut lawmakers made it illegal due to the level of gambling that was being associated with the game. And this law was quickly circumvented by adding an addition pin, which paved the way for today's 10-pin game that we know and enjoy. Now, another interesting part is that bowling was known as a sport frequently played by only men. This began to change as the sport became increasingly regulated, like today, and bowling now is obviously anyone can play. It's a unisex sport and it's enjoyed by people all over the world. Are you ready to transform your church from a building to a welcoming home? Are you ready to create lasting first impressions? We've been right where you are and have felt the way you're feeling. When you decided to go into ministry, it was because you felt a call to seek and save the lost, to make disciples, and to fulfill the Great Commission. It's time to feel encouraged about the importance of what you do and challenged to improve and innovate on how you do it. It's time to learn how to connect with people and make them want to keep coming back. The process to start reaching and keeping is simple. Our focus is on creating welcoming environments for members and guests each weekend. We are here to encourage you. Get ready. First Impressions Conference Fall 2023. Coming soon. All right, so we're talking about what are the origins of bowling. So on skilledbowlers.com, they are looking at the history of bowling, and some of the information is just a repeat of in other segments. Then it says in this particular article, let me see specifically who wrote it. In September, it was September 29, 2021. Let me see who published it. I don't see anyone's name attached to it. But it goes on to say, hold on. It repeats basically what the things I said before in the other segments, but it also says diving deeper into the advent of elementary bowling technology. A head curator of the San Diego Museum of Man, Dr. Malcolm Rogers, uncovered the rules of something similar in ancient Polynesian game that they had, and it was using elliptical bowling balls and flat stone discs, and players attempted to it says no down 9 or 10, but I think it means mow down or hit down 9 or 10 pins from a distance of 60 feet, the same distance between the foul line and pins in 10-pin bowling. Before modern wooden pins and synthetic options were in use, ancient civilizations worked through many different materials to find the right composition for a pin. One basic form of bowling after another cropped up until 40 AD, with the actual birth of 9 pins and 10-pin bowling not far off. Now, I did find another article and I lost it. It also showed that a particular group of people or civilization, but I can't find it now. Obviously, they used bones, animal bones or human bones as the pins. Then it brings us back to what we talked about in previous segments, is 9 pins in the birth of modern bowling. And around 4 AD, modern bowling began in Western Europe, and we talked about this, and Paderborn, Germany. And it was a form of bowling, was played as a religious ceremony. Now, we already touched on that. In the cloisters of cathedrals, parishioners were asked to play and place all the pins given to them on one side of the cloister. These 9 pins, as they were called, kegels, embodied the heed or heathen spirits. Parishioners were then coaxed to roll their bowling balls sans finger holes at the heed, which is these heathen spirits. And if they could hit the pins, they are deemed pure of heart and seen as capable of withstanding or slaying these spirits. You were just listening to Teachable Moments with April podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed this episode. We invite you to stay connected with us on the other social media platforms of ours, which is TikTok, Pinterest,
Instagram, Threads, and YouTube. Also, we'd like to invite you to check out our official podcast landing page on podpage.com/teachable moments with April to see all our content in one place and leave personal messages, feedback, and more.